Hi, in this video I am going to show you how to do exploratory data analysis using Python. We'll be needing a dataset. I'm going to use the cars dataset that I have used in my other videos. So I'm going to import that dataset and we will perform exploratory data analysis, in short known as EDA, on this dataset. We'll be needing quite a few Python libraries in order to perform EDA. So what are the libraries that we'll be needing? We'll be needing OS, Pandas, NumPy, Matplotlib, and Seaborn. Okay, so we'll first import these libraries. So that's the first step. And then we will import our data set. Our data set has been kept in this particular path. So I'll define this as a working directory so that we can also save our output in this particular path. Okay, and our data set is already there in the path, right? So where you have your import data, it's better to define that as a working library so that in the same folder you can always keep your output as well. So chdir, and we'll simply be needing the OS library. Okay, that's the way we define the working library, and we'll run that. So working library is now defined. So once the working library is defined, you don't have to explicitly mention the path while importing the dataset, because now we are already in that particular folder. So we'll simply be importing the dataset from their folder, and the dataset is already there in that folder. Okay, so we'll be using the pandas to import the CSV file. The data is in CSV file. You can also import other forms of data like flat files or even Excel files and so on. We'll use read underscore CSV method in order to import the CSV file. Okay. Now here you can see the pandas has been imported as PD, right? So henceforward, instead of pandas, we'll simply be using PD. Instead of NumPy, we'll be using NP. For Matplotlib, we'll be using PLT, and for Seaborn, we'll be using SNS. So pandas is basically for handling of data. NumPy, on the other hand, doing some basic numerical computation, and then Matplotlib and Seaborn both will be using to do various plot, right? To visualize data, we'll be using Matplotlib and Seaborn. All right, so we have we'll now import the data. We'll run the code. Now the data has been imported, and let's just see. So we are importing and saving in a data frame called cars. Okay, so data frame is basically just a two-dimensional form of data, like the data you see in an Excel sheet or a spreadsheet. That's the way we'll keep it, right? So it's just a two-dimensional form data. We have a fancy name called data frame, right? So that's the way we call this. Okay, so what's there in cards, or the data frame that we just created using importing the CSV file? So we'll use the head method in order to see the top 5 observations, and let's run this, and we'll can see the top 5 observation in our dataset. This dataset is called cars dataset. It has the information about different cars, the make of the car, the model, the type, the origin, the price, engine size, number of cylinders, horsepower, mileage, weight, wheelbase, and length. So there are quite a number of features that we have in this dataset, and we can use this dataset for various reasons. We can do a segmentation modeling using this. I have shown you in another video how to do segmentation analysis using this particular dataset, but using R. So we'll simply be doing exploratory data analysis without having or without building any model in this video. Okay, but we can of course use this exploratory data analysis before all kinds of data analysis or statistical modeling that we do in our day-to-day life. Okay, so these are some of the basic steps that we need to follow before building any model. Now that we have the data and we can see the data by ourselves, but we can only see the top 5 observations, right? We can of course see the entire observation, set of observations, but it's difficult to sort of understand simply by looking at the raw file or the raw observations, right? We need to summarize them in some form in order to get some basic insight out of this data, right? That's where the EDA will help us in great deal. So we'll also see the information about the data set, like the data types and so on. So we'll use the info method in order to see. So we'll run this. So cars.info is going to give us like the types, the data types of each variable and so on. Okay, so we have, let's say here, engine size, it just float. Horsepower is an integer, right? So these are some basic observations. If there is some mismatch, we can of course change the data type. Okay, if we want to change the data type, that also we can do. But before that, we also need to know what is the data type by default that Python is assigned. Okay, for instance, we do not want a certain number of variables. For instance, here we do not want the price and invoice price, the retail price and the invoice price. We simply want to get rid of. We simply want to drop them from the variable. How do we do that? Okay, so we'll simply first define a list. So here is a list, some form of array, where we define these variable names MSRP and invoice. Okay, and then we'll use the drop method. Okay, so we'll use the drop method in order to remove these or drop these two variables. Okay, so here is the list drop underscore columns. It has got two variable names, and that's exactly what we are using as the parameter to this method. And what it's going to do is simply going to remove or drop these two variables. Okay, now we have run it. We can see whether we actually have. Okay, so let us run the above code again, like cars.info. Now I'm sure you will see that the two variables are no more there in the data frame, and that's what you can see, right? We do not have MSRP, neither we have invoice. So we have been able to get rid of both variables. All right. We can also draw rows, and oftentimes what happens is that we come across duplicate rows, and duplicate rows are not good for analysis. We need to get rid of these duplicate rows. Okay, so duplicate rows are basically rows which are just repeating. There's no additional information. It's the same of information repeating more than once. How do we do that? We can get rid of the duplicate rows for all columns at once, right? We don't have to do any iteration as such. So how do we do that? We'll use the method drop underscore duplicates. Okay, and all we need to do is that we need to simply give keep underscore first. That means we simply select the first observation and remove the others, right? Given that the row is duplicate, it doesn't actually matter whether which row it actually selects or keeps, and which other rows it deletes. But we'll simply define this in order to keep the first one also. Otherwise, it simply by default also keeps the first one and removes the others. All right, and our data set doesn't have duplicates. That's what I already know. But in case you have duplicates, then this is very useful. It takes out all the duplicates rows from this data set.